my name is James Nicholson and welcome to my YouTube channel. In this video, I want to talk about HMO licenses and how you can avoid them in some circumstances, or at least what you need to know to make sure that you're compliant, because it's very important that you don't run an illegal HMO, because if you're caught, you could face a fine of up to £50,000. So we don't want to do that, do we? So while we're here, if you haven't done already, do subscribe to the channel over there and hit the bell notification. We've got new content every single day on this channel. Make sure as well, while you're here, you smash the like button or tickle the like button. Do something to that like button over there. That really helps with the YouTube algorithm and it gets us more views on the content. So I really appreciate you doing that. So, HMOs. A lot of people want to do them. Firstly, what is an HMO? And for those that don't know. So an HMO is a house of multiple occupancy. Maybe you've lived in one. Maybe you were a student. Think of student accommodation. Initially, that was what most HMOs were student accommodation. But more recently, with the cost of living crisis, with the housing shortage that we've got in the UK, and the fact that we're living longer, and there's a lot of people crammed into our small little island, a lot of people have turned to HMOs in a more professional way. So you've got office workers in there. You've got all types of people in there, just young adults or any kind of person that lives in these types of property now. They're more common in cities where it can be hard to get accommodation close to the centre of the action, but they can be anywhere in the UK. So when you have an HMO, if you're the landlord like me, you must be licensed. Now, it gets a bit more complicated than that because every council has different rules. And so you must first and foremost contact your local council and find out what are the HMO rules in that area. Some places you need a license, some you don't. And if you find somewhere that is potentially going to bring in a license and doesn't have it already, that can be a great opportunity to get in there and be a landlord in that area, because when the license rules come in, or if they're bringing any new rules in, for example, you get grandfathered in with the old rules, and so you've now got an advantage over a new landlord coming into your area. Also puts the value up should you wish to sell. So let's look at some ways to skirt around legally how you can avoid potentially having to get a costly license. First is to have less or 4 or less tenants. 4 or less tenants. Most areas, if you have less than 4 tenants or 4 or less, you may not need a license. Now, I still say you need to check the local council, whatever you think. Maybe even if you think, for example, I invest in Hastings, maybe I've just got the belief that, hey, Hastings has that rule, but maybe they've changed it, or maybe they're just about to change it. So it's important that you just make that call and just find out, speak to the housing team and find out what the rules are right now and what it's likely to become in the near future in case they're changing it, right? Now, if you're a social landlord, a social housing, that can be a loophole in some areas. So if you're a landlord and you're renting it out, maybe as one property to a social housing provider, sometimes they have a way of not needing to get a license. And so that can be some way that you can get around this. Again, with all of these points, but I really want to make it clear, because the consequences of running an unlicensed property is a £50,000 fine. So I don't want anyone to come back in a year from now and comment below and say, hey, I followed what you said and now I've got a 50 grand fine. It's still on you to find out. So speak to your local council and say, look, what if we run it as social housing? Does that need a license then? Because if it doesn't, that could be a way to get an advantage and do really well there. So that's obviously a great thing. Next is just go for smaller properties, right? So you get huge HMOs. I've seen ones where you've got 50 people in them, like a hotel. I've seen plenty with 20, especially around Gatwick Airport area. There's some huge HMOs in that area. So go for smaller properties, anything under 5 bedrooms. A lot of areas, you don't need a license then, so you can check in. But some, regardless of how many people you have in it, you will need a license. So again, go back to the council and ask. Now, another way to make it so you don't need to get the license is find a landlord that already has an HMO that wants to sell. There's tons of landlords that are just tired of all the work. They're tired of running their portfolio. They've made their money now and they want to cash out. So they want to sell to a young up and coming or a hungry landlord like you, someone that's just getting started. And so you can go onto the local council website and find out all the people that have an HMO license in a town, send them all a letter and say, look, do you want to sell your property? There's a great chance that maybe 10% of the market at any time would consider the right offer. Now, if you take on one of their properties, you need to do this with the council again, but you can transfer the HMO license to yourself. That means that you don't have to go through all the work. It's probably going to be a cost involved in there somewhere, but it's an easier way to do it. So if you find a property that's already licensed, it's easier to move it across. That means when you get a property, you don't have to do all the new refurbs and regulations and stuff like that. So you can move that across. So license transfer is a way to do this. Next, look, you could rent out a property just to one family, right? As a single let, just a big family. And that is one way that Hastings Council, who I've got a property that's got a lot of people living in it, but Hastings Council, they run it as a social housing provider themselves, and they then run it to one family. So it doesn't have all the rules about needing separate kitchens and extra bathrooms and all that kind of stuff. So that's an option. Or you could just rent it out to a bigger family, right? That's an option to use, not run it as an HMO. So avoid all that stress of having lots of different tenants, but just make it attractive to bigger families. Maybe have some extra bedrooms in there, but rent it to one family. Then you don't have to worry about getting that HMO license. But in summary, it's very important that you do cover all the legal stuff as a landlord that you're responsible for. It's not a shortcut. This video is not about cutting corners. It's about being licensed when you need to. It's about using opportunities to find areas that maybe don't need a license right now that could, or finding areas where it's not particularly strict. Some areas are burdensome on landlords, and you'll just find all the rules and regulations that you need in that area are very, very difficult. And so look at another area where it's not so strict. Or in one town, you might have licenses needed in certain parts of the town. Then look at the map and look outside of those areas. Anyway, that's it from me. Let me know your thoughts on that. Do comment below. Do smash a like. Do check out more content on my channel, including this video right here.